I'm Adam Housley, and you're in the strategy room with 4 sitting governors and several senators in the packed presidential race. It's fair to ask how much time and attention the candidates can devote to their day jobs. Voters and public officials in New Jersey and beyond complain that while the candidates are away, important legislation is being left in limbo. Here with reaction, our political strategists, Douglas Smith and Tom Basile. Welcome you guys to the strategy room. We appreciate you guys joining us.
Good to be here.
All right, Doug, starting with you, can candidates both keep their day jobs and run for president?
Look, I think it's a great question. I live in Washington, D.C., so unfortunately I don't get a governor. But I think if I was living in a state and paying the taxes in that state, I'd want my governor to be in the state. I remember in 1991 working for Governor Clinton, and look, you're running for president, you're gone a lot. And I think it really is an important question. Like, I'm not a big fan of Chris Christie. I do think it's a little unfair halfway through to change the rules on the guy. That being said, I think it's a valid question to ask. But I do think most importantly, as it relates to the security for these governors, on that one, I do think the states are absolutely in their right to ask the campaigns to reimburse, because I don't think the taxpayers in those states should be reimbursing for candidates as they travel around running for president.
Tom, this is not really a new question. We've seen governors and senators run for president for years, and the money that's been spent and the time that's been needed is over at least the last 25, 30 years has been pretty consistent. Obviously, money's grown, but the time is obviously been consistent. So what's your thoughts? is it fair for a candidate to keep their day job and run for president?
This comes up every 4 years. It is fair, and in fact, in many places, people are proud of the fact that their governor is on the national stage. Look, these governors who run, and particularly the chief executives, they prepare their staffs, they prepare their offices for being absent. They even handle their legislative agenda so that most of them are not dealing with significant issues during the time during the campaign. So I do think it's unfair. I think that what's going on in New Jersey is all about making Christie look bad. I don't think that the bill will actually go anywhere. And I have to agree in part with Doug that security is important for these folks, particularly in our current security climate. So there should be some consideration, perhaps, to campaigns reimbursing part of the security expenses, but these guys can certainly govern in our modern age while being on the campaign trail.
All right, Douglas, speaking of security, obviously, once the candidates are known, then, of course, the feds take over the security situation. So we're talking about up until that point. Critics in home states say it's not fair to the constituents for these guys right now, and in this case, it's all men that are elected running for office. The women, of course, are not currently holding any offices. But critics will say it's not fair to their constituents that they're running. But a lot of these critics are also pretty easy when it's their person running, if you know what I mean. So a lot of times these critics are just political opposites.
No, I think it's absolutely fair. Look, I think in some of these states, I think in Louisiana, they're probably glad to have their governor out of the state at the moment. I think in Ohio, he's done a great job. We're probably going to miss him. I think there's probably no safer place for Governor Christie than to be out of New Jersey campaigning. But you're right. It's political pot shots. The reality is what are there? I think 16 as of today, 17 Republicans running.
340 to be exact.
It's hard to keep track. Last night we were at a party and people tried to get everyone to name it, and I was there with a couple of Republican operatives, and no one could actually come up with an accurate list. But look, I think everyone's going to take pot shots in this. The reality is, though, in the modern age, everyone's got an iPhone. Everyone's got a laptop. If the governor truly needs to be in touch, he'll be in touch. And if the governor, something happens in their state, they'll pay that price if they're not able to be there and take part in responding to that disaster or whatever needs to happen.
And certainly they could be back in the state. And in the case of like New Jersey, there's according to the Constitution, when the governor is out of state, executive authority is automatically passed, I believe, to the President of the Senate. So these states and these offices, these governors, they certainly account for their absences during this time.
And of course, people that want the states to do less are happy because less is getting done. And all joking aside, the 2016 vote coming up, I guess my question also is, do voters really care if somebody is either a current office holder or a former office holder. I mean, we saw Ross Perot obviously make a pretty significant run back in '92. We're seeing Donald Trump, of course, get some pretty high poll numbers so far, at least. But other than that, I mean, everybody running obviously has held. Well, I guess Carly Fiorina hasn't held an office either. But other than those three that I just mentioned, and of course Ross Perot not running in 2016,
and
none of them.
Dr. Carson.
Everybody else has held an office. Yeah, bring him back, right? Everybody else is either holding an office or has held an office. So I guess voters obviously see that as experience, and you hear these arguments go back and forth when someone is either contemplating running or is running. Hey, this person never held an elective office. I mean, does that matter?
Well, you know, we also hear the opposite comment, that we have folks running who've spent too much time in government, and I think that what voters
they all have, really. You can make that argument.
Well, I think what the voters are looking for is some balance. Somebody who's been in government their entire career lacks a degree of perspective on the business community, and somebody who has only been in the private sector lacks the understanding of how the mechanics of government work.
All right, Douglas Smith and Tom Basile, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you guys weighing in. Of course, we have a long ways to go, 2016, and as I mentioned, there's currently, 376 people running right now for President of the United States. The more the merrier. Thanks, guys, for joining us from D.C. We appreciate it. And for more on this topic and many others, you can check out foxnews.com for everything you want to know about the 2016 presidential race. Until then, I'm Adam Housley, and you're watching The Strategy Room.